start with the data. And one step further, Eric, I would recommend that you don't just focus on the numbers in terms of like, what's my cancellation percentage? What are the cancellation reasons? Get really granular about what they're canceling for.
Mm-hmm. And so we'd allow our customer service team to kind of preliminarily talk about the situation, listen to what the customer's saying. And then if it really got to the point where they wanted to cancel their service, they'd say, hey, let me go ahead and get all your information. I'm going to have, so-and-so follow up with you, an office manager, case manager follow up with you. And we'll make sure we get this all squared away. Thank you so much for calling, right? They keep the experience 1000% positive.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Bug Bucks podcast, a podcast designed to help you become a bug money millionaire. I'm Alan Draper.
And I'm Eric Bassett.
And we're your hosts. Today's episode is brought to you by Bug Bucks Plus, which is the #1 course designed to help you start and grow your pest control company. Eric and I are dedicated to providing you with the best resources to help you on your journey to success. Before we begin, I just want to remind everybody the best way to receive new episodes is by subscribing to our show on your preferred platform, such as Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you love the show, please leave us a review and a rating. And one last reminder, if you haven't joined our Facebook group, go to Bug Bucks. That's BUGBUX on Facebook. We love to hear from our listeners, and we love to be able to interact with them on that platform. What do you have for us, Eric?
Today, we are diving into questions from our Bug Bucks Facebook group. And I'm going to give some credit to Sean Gregerson for this question. He wants to know where to start when it comes to lowering customer attrition. So what do you think, Alan? What are your thoughts?
This is something that really separates the pest control industry and any type of recurring revenue business from other types of businesses. It's kind of one of the sweet spots that we've got. I think we have a few in the pest control industry, but this is certainly one of them where month after month, we don't have to start from zero. Think about it. Some businesses do, a retail store. Now, of course, they're going to get repeat business, but that business isn't guaranteed. And I'm sure they have some data about repeat customers and stuff like that. But think about from a pest control company, we can look out into the future, impute some type of cancellation rate, and know exactly how much we are going to make month by month from future customers, from our current customers in the future, which makes it really nice. So because it's really nice, this question is very important. But because it's important, like most important things, there's a lot of things that go into play. And it's not just like, hey, you provide better customer service. There's a lot that goes into it. And because of that, I think you start with data. A lot of times with important things as owners, we will, you'll be walking across the floor where you have your CSRs, or you'll hear, if it's one person or you're the one that's taking the call, and you'll maybe get 2-3 cancellations back to back, and you're like, what's going on with their cancellation rate? And I get that. And it's something that should have, because of its importance, should have kind of this emotional tie, but you have to remember to get the data. So let's put things in context. Let's look at, the month's data or year-to-date data, or year-to-date, year-over-year data where you're comparing to previous years over the same time period, which is really important in pest control because of our seasonality. You're going to get cancels during points in the year where people don't feel like there's much value to the service. That's very common in colder weather, snow on the ground. People are like, wait a minute, why am I paying for pest control? So start with the data. And one step further, Eric, I would recommend that you don't just focus on the numbers in terms of like, what's my cancellation percentage, but what are the cancellation reasons? So get really granular about what they're canceling for. And a customer, a lot of times, not necessarily all the time, but there are certain personalities that they won't tell you because they don't want to hurt your feelings. So they'll say it's something on their end. Like, it's just, we can't afford it anymore. And that may be the case, but you want to make sure that there's a system set up with your CSRs where there's a couple of probative questions without offending the customer or making them feel bad, where you just kind of take a stab at it. Like, hey, if it's costing you too much, why don't I waive the next month for you? Why don't we just, you've been with us for 2 years. Why don't I waive that? You make some attempts. And if it's really about money, then they should bite on some of those, or, continue the conversation. So watch out for those it's not you, it's me type of responses, and dig a little bit to get into the data of, hey, 10% of my cancels are because people moved out of state or out of my service area. 20% of cancels are service related. And then with that data, you can take the top 2-3 reasons maybe and start really honing in on your systems with those.
Yeah. And I really love that we're talking about diving into the data. I mean, I'm a very data-driven person,
Oh,
me.
yeah. Everybody knows that about Eric.
So as soon as you say data, I'm like, oh, yeah, I can talk about this all day. So, attrition and cancellations, I mean, that is such a hairy lag measure, right?
Yeah. That's a good point.
I mean, by the time that you see the cancellation, I mean, everything that went into the reasons why that customer canceled have probably happened so far back. I mean, unless you had some very immediate thing, a lot of reasons why people cancel products and services is after an accumulative amount of just so or kind of bad experiences, right? Or they've been thinking for a long time, like, oh man, is it worth it? I don't know, maybe so. And then eventually it just gets to that point where it's not worth it anymore. And so they cancel, right? And so if you're just looking at attritions from that percentage and you're thinking, oh, okay, well, let's, I'm seeing a lot of attrition, seeing a lot of cancellations, where do I look? Which is kind of Sean's whole question here. Going back to the data is so clarifying for you, right? Because, if you look at, just like you said, breaking it down by reason, and as our CSRs at Natura, we have it broken down on our spreadsheet where they take cancellation calls and they mark down how many they took, and they mark them down by reason. So whether that's, technician issue or a scheduling problem or a recurring pest issue that we can't solve, or, value or price-based concerns, all those things get broken down. And if you follow those trends month to month or even year to year, you'll notice that it's not just issues you have with your company, but it's also certain times of year that customers, their value in pest control changes. And so once you see the data and once you're able to kind of dive into that and realize how that really impacts your attrition, how it impacts your cancellations, then you can actually start coming up with business strategies to offset those. Where you're like, okay, we're going into this time of year, and this is usually where it's really high for this particular type of cancellation. How do we fix that, right? Do we send out customer emails? Do we send out letters? What can we do to proactively combat that? Like, we have a competitor offer reason in our cancellation reason that we track, right? And that's 9 times out of 10 door-to-door guys, right?
Right.
And we know that the time for that is April through August. So during that time, that's when we're sending out those emails, those loyal customer emails and letters and postcards where we say, hey, just a reminder, if anybody stops by and, gives you an offer or says anything about your current products or services from our company, like, call us, right? Call us and let us know. So the data on this is huge. And the clarity that it brings is so important. So if you're looking at your attrition numbers and it's kind of freaking you out, set that aside for a second. Let the lag measure be whatever it is, and then go find the lead measures. Go find all the contributing data that's going to actually help clarify things for you. I just as a side note, I was talking to a guy the other day because we were talking about contracts. And he was like, hey, I'm really looking to implement contracts into my company because I currently don't do that. And for him, he specifically meant term agreements, having a specific term that your customer commits to using your service. And I said, okay, so tell me more about that. Why are you looking to implement contracts? And he said, well, I'm just getting a lot of cancellations from customers. And I feel like, if I was able to get them on contract, then I wouldn't, right? And I kind of smiled and I thought, okay, well, let's think about this. Is the contract the reason they're really staying, right? Or is the contract the reason they want to leave? Just because customers are under contract doesn't mean that they want to stay, right? Versus because they're under contract as they may want to go. It's whether or not they're happy with the service.
Exactly.
Right. And if you are relying on contracts to boost your attrition numbers, I mean, there is some correlation there. I'm not going to say that there isn't. But if you're relying on that, then what you really have there is a bunch of upset customers that don't really like the service, that are just waiting for their contract to be over so they can leave, right? So it's another one of those quick things that I wanted to point out, that whether your customers are under contract or not can be a contributing factor to your attrition, but you have to look past that, right? And see what the real reason is why people are going to leave. It's not just because they have to stay, right? It's because they want to stay.
Yeah, I think there's, to kind of address the question, there are going to be a series of kind of low-hanging fruit, like things that you can quick fix to help with attrition. And there are going to be some more systemic things. The systemic things are going to be, how are we making sure we're adding value every step of the way in terms of when we sell it, when we're providing the service, and that goes to personnel issues, which can take a little longer and is not such an immediate fix. I've mentioned this book before, and I know you're familiar with it, Eric. It's called Influence, and it's by an ASU professor, Robert Cialdini, is his name. And this book's really cool. And the core concept of the book is this concept of feeling an indebtedness from somebody that gives something to you. I'm trying to think of the exact term. He has a term for it.
The law of reciprocation. Reciprocity.
Yeah, reciprocity. That's exactly right. So what happens is when somebody gives us something, unless you're some type of psychopath, you naturally, the social response is to feel like, oh man, like I want to return the favor, right? That's a common saying, return the favor, pass it on, whatever, pay it forward. And so we've at Proof tried to apply this principle in a couple of different ways, specifically when it comes to cancellation. So Eric was talking about, hey, identify those periods of time when you have higher cancellations and do a preemptive strike and send them. It could be as something as small as, $5 off their next service, 10% off their next service, a donation to a charity, something where it's like, oh, they're giving me something. You could go as far as $5 gift cards, and it doesn't have to be a huge amount. But would you pay $5 to save an account? I sure hope so. Mm-hmm. And if you do that preemptively, and it's at a time just before that spike in cancellation, people are going to think twice about it. Now, the opposite is also true. You'll notice, like, when you send out, late invoices or whatever, reminders for payment, they feel like you're taking something away from them. And so that contact a lot of times will, lead to a cancellation call or, whatever, if you raise prices. So remember kind of that concept, because I think that's low-hanging fruit, Eric. I think if you're like, okay, my Michigan branch, my cancellations kind of hit an all-time high in November. Maybe in October, I say something about Happy Halloween. Here's a freaking pumpkin spice latte or something on us or whatever, right? Even if they don't end up using it, it's like, oh man, that was super nice. It's going to be tougher for them to cancel. So identify certain kind of low hanging fruit, from your top 3 or 2 or 3, and then work on the more systemic things. That's more quadrant 2, where it's like important, not urgent, not specifically time-based, but very important. And I think, Eric, you kind of mentioned this. It can be more than one thing, right? It can be like, because you mentioned how it's like over time and it's a lagging indicator, which I think is a very important principle here. So, because a lot of times we want to react immediately to something, but if it's a lagging indicator, it's like, okay, I just like, that ship sailed 3 months ago and I'm kind of looking for it in the ocean. It's like, oh, that's already gone. So what can I do, in the future to prevent that? I think that's an important point.
Oh, definitely. And, I know that there's a lot of guys out there that I don't know what the conversation is like when those customers call in, and I can't speak, for the quality of the customer service staff that you have, but it takes a little bit of courage to be able to ask a customer, hey, what's going on? Why do you want to cancel today? Right. And it takes a lot of tact. You can't just dive right in there and be like, oh, like you want to cancel? Well, tell me why. Right.
Yeah.
They're really not going to come out and tell you. And sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes if you have a really good relationship with those customers, and there's a high level of trust there, they'll just tell you, they'll tell you whether they lost their job or whether their husband's going to do it on his own or whatever the heck's going on. Right. Or if a door-to-door guy stopped by, right? We have a lot of customers who, fortunately, every year they call us. They're like, "Hey, so-and-so just stopped by. I told him that there's no way I'm switching," But I think it's important that you can train your team to be able to have a good communication process where they acknowledge what the customer's concern is, no matter what it is, right? And then they're able to ask some questions and build some trust so that the customer feels able to actually tell them the truth, right? If you don't have trust, you're not going to get that truth out of them. So, even if it's as simple as saying, hey, like, I'm really sad to see you go. We obviously want to hang on to our customers as long as we can. And I just want to know, what do you feel like we couldn't have done better, right? What ways could we have been a little bit of a better company for you, right? And just see what they say, because that kind of helps set things up for you. Either they tell you a reason why things didn't work out very well and you can use that to kind of rebuild, or they say, actually, you guys were really, really great. The only reason that we're canceling is because X, Y, and Z, right? Or whatever's going on. So either way, you get some information. And in that kind of scenario, information just it's not just important, it's crucial. You're not going to save that account unless you really know what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And it made me think of a couple of things. One, just because they're canceling doesn't mean they're gone forever. And it's hard for us to kind of remember that.
Yep.
It's like, hey, make sure you treat them well. Make sure you thank them for their feedback, regardless of what it is. A lot of times we'll offer something like, hey, we goofed this one up, and because of that, if you ever decide to try us again, we're going to give you, the second month free or whatever, right? Another question that kind of came to my mind, Eric, I want to get your thoughts on. What are your thoughts on having a dedicated cancellation expert? So it's like, okay, we have somebody in our office that is able to do a lot of the things that you just talked about, like build that rapport with the customer, like listen to their feedback, respond appropriately. What do you think about having a dedicated cancellation rep?
Having dedicated departments, depending on call type, have their big advantages. If you're able to utilize them without there being any kind of a bottleneck within your department, then they're great. For example, you don't want a customer to call in and they say, hey, I'm thinking about canceling my service. Well, and the person who's talking on the phone doesn't handle cancellations, and the person who does handle cancellations is on lunch or something else. And what they say is, okay, well, the person who handles that isn't here right now, or, hey, I can't help you with that, right? And so they have to wait to cancel their account. But if you do have the capabilities where there's enough availability within that department where that person who wants to cancel can talk to someone right away, a person who handles those types of calls all the time is going to have all of the tactics, all of the communication processes, all those same things at the top of their mind, right? I used to, when I worked for DirecTV, DirecTV actually has, in the call center in Boise, Idaho, they had, I think it was probably a department of that was probably like 600 or 700 just cancellation reps. That's it. That's all they did. That's all they talked to. It was just customers who called them, who had competitor offers, who had bad experiences, who had issues with their bill. And it was just that all day long, 10 hours a day, cancellation calls. And, sometimes it can be a little mind numbing to only talk to customers who aren't happy with you. But it was also equally as rewarding to learn how to be really good at saving those customers.
Yeah.
So I know in our office, we've had scenarios where we've been able to identify key people who were better at saving customers. And so we'd allow our customer service team to kind of preliminarily talk about the situation, listen to what the customer's saying. And then if it really got to the point where they wanted to cancel their service, they'd say, hey, let me go ahead and get all your information. I'm going to have, so-and-so follow up with you, an office manager, case manager follow up with you, and we'll make sure we get this all squared away. Thank you so much for calling, right? They keep the experience 1000% positive. That way, when the person calls back, that customer's not on the defense, right? And we're still able to feed that customer to somebody who's a little bit more capable when it comes to cancellations.
Yeah, I like that idea. And you bring up a really good point, because if you're canceling, you're not all the time, but you're possibly frustrated, upset, not happy, whatever. So one thing that you don't want to hear is, hey, like, I can't help you, right? That's first thing. Hey, I'm calling cancel. Oh, I can't help you. Having that conversation, kind of going through some of those concerns, definitely helps. And if you're a small enough operation where it's like, we have 2 people answering the phone, I think you can still do it where it's like, hey, this is the dedicated person if they're available, and so we want them to take 80% of the cancel calls, and incentivize them for saving them and, things like that. But if somebody gets frustrated, by all means, like, you have the authority to stop that, because any chance of winning them back, which, by the way, these cancellations should be paired with some type of win back campaign via email, mailers, something. So once they're gone, they're not gone forever, right? Once they cancel, they're not gone forever. So you should incorporate some type of win back campaign. And don't burn the bridge. Don't end it right there. It's not worth it, because you'll be able to remarket to them forever. One of the best assets that you have as a pest control company is your email, phone list, things like that.
Yeah. And if you guys aren't using win-back opportunities, as a campaign to go out and get those customers back, you're missing out. That's low-hanging fruit. We do win-back campaigns that are emails, which are free 99, right? And we send them out, and a handful of customers come back to us every month, which is just a miracle. They're like, oh yeah, I saw your email. And you look at their account history, and like, some of those customers are like, we're leaving, never coming back. And it's like, well, sure.
Gotcha.
Right. Gotcha. Because after all that stuff wears off, right? And after they have pest issues again, and if you do it at the right time with the right person, there you go. Right.
Absolutely. So, and a big part of that is how you handle it, cancellation.
Yes.
That's a really big part of that. Because you can either just completely end the relationship forever right then, or you can leave like a thought. Think about it. Like, I was just having this discussion today about how there's different scenarios when I have to let somebody go. And I prefer when they're a jerk about it, when it's like, because then I'm like, oh, I made the right decision. But the people they're like, you know what, Alan, I was here for the team. I tried my best. There's things I definitely need to work on as a person. I'm like, am I making the right decision?
Yeah.
Right. And I think our customers are like that. So if you really take care of them, you have the opportunity to win back that relationship.
Oh, 100%. So we're going to switch gears just a little bit. Kind of on the flip side of the same coin, Caleb Gabriel, his question here was, what trends outside of just cancellations and sales are important? So if I'm kind of reading his question right, I'm kind of thinking here that he's probably seeing people talk about sales numbers and cancellation numbers, and he's thinking, okay, I get that. Outside of those, what else should I be looking at here?
The first thing that came to mind for me, Eric, is gross profit. And just to kind of summarize that, gross profit is the amount of revenue that you have left over after performing the service. So any cost that's directly related to performing a service, right? The chemical/product that you leave at people's houses, the technician's time, the fuel that's used to service the accounts, and different companies are going to include different, variable expenses, as they're called, within that cost of goods sold or cost of service. But what's left after that is the gross profit. And then below the gross profit are all your fixed expenses, your rent, your insurance, office staff, branding, marketing, other things that aren't related directly to the cost of service. This is why I like gross profit as a metric. And I especially like margins. So I like to compare things. I don't like raw numbers as much as I like. So I don't like, if my gross profit is 100,000, that means less to me, $100,000. That means less to me than if you told me your gross profit was 70%. Now that means something to me, because I know that you spent 30% performing the service. So the cool thing about gross profit is, if you get gross profit right, you can grow your company by adding services. And that,
Yeah.
I'm going to say that again. So if your gross profit is right, think about it. If 30%, for example, I have some branches that are in that neighborhood, some that are a little lower than that in terms of performing the service. If I'm in that neighborhood, then I can solve a lot of problems by getting more customers. But if my gross profit is really low, if it's in the tens or teens, I'm going to have a really tough time solving the problem by growing because my cost of service is too high. So if I add more services, it's just going to, continue to dig myself into a hole, with the one exception being, if you have fuel and technician time in there, if you get more concentrated, the scale hopefully makes, there's some efficiencies there. But I like gross profit and I like margins generally.
Yeah. And I think it's the one thing that I'm trying to remember here is, just like you said, you can't outgrow a gross profit problem.
Exactly.
Right? It's just, if you remember that, then you'll be on the track for success. It's all about efficiencies, right? So if you can get those efficiencies dialed in, then as you scale and grow and those efficiencies stay aligned with what you're trying to do, then you'll be good, right? And there are some efficiencies that, like you said, you increase your route density, or you're able to get, better discounts on products because you're ordering more products early, or some other things. Some stuff helps a little bit. But yeah, that's a great one. I mean, understanding the efficiencies, or I should say inefficiencies of your business and how that impacts your bottom line is an awesome thing to kind of keep an eye on. One of the other things I was going to mention is, while we have a lot of lag measures that we track at our company, we've started trying to really move towards tracking lead measures, which is kind of weird because you're not used to tracking behaviors a lot. It's so much simpler to track just the numbers, the results. And so we've started implementing quality scorecards for a few different things, few different parts of our business. And one of them is a call quality scorecard. And it basically just has these 5 different sections, or 4 different sections with 5 categories each. They're all worth about 5 points. So it's like 100%, right? So if you score an A+ on the scorecard, you're doing pretty well. And what's nice about it is that it all has criteria that are 100% in control of what the rep can do, what they can accomplish. So it doesn't matter if the customer said yes to the deal or not. It doesn't matter if the account was saved or not. It doesn't matter if we quote unquote made the customer happy per se. But it is a full list of all the things that we've identified, gives you the best possibility of closing a sale, saving a customer, right? Making a customer happy. And if we can track those behaviors and they're scoring well on the scorecard, then the odds are that our lag measures, the results we're measuring, are going to be great, right? So we've got a call quality scorecard. We also have a service quality scorecard. Same thing. We go through a service with a technician and we ask him about, what he did, why he did it, where he applied product, what his philosophies were, see if he kind of went through his customer communication checklist as far as asking for reviews, letting him know the technician was going to be there on time, etc. And we're accounting that if he's doing all those things right, then lag measures that he is in charge of will improve, like attrition or cancellations or just customer satisfaction, review numbers that we're going to have. We also have a vehicle quality scorecard because I hate it when my vehicles are dirty and nasty and gross, dude. We spend so much good money on buying and outfitting these vehicles, dude. I hate it when they're not taken care of. So hard. So yeah, quality scorecards. I'll leave it at that. That's one of the things I feel like is a really good thing to track.
I love that because, it goes back to, Stephen Covey talks about your circle of influence. And it's like, let's focus on the things that you have control over. Ultimately, the person on the other end, the customer, potential customer, whoever, is going to make the decision. But there are certain things that you control that have a likelihood of increasing a positive response from the customer. And the cool thing about that is both when good things happen and when bad things happen. So if you think about it, if they buy, then it's like, okay, that's pretty cool that they bought. I went through, I did all the things that I control. If they didn't buy, hey, that's the way it goes. They have autonomy. It's like, we, unlike the government, we can't throw people in jail if they don't pay their bill or do business with us. But I checked off all the boxes. So I think those types of metrics, which require, as Eric talks about this is a lot of work. It's not easy, but that type of feedback, direct feedback to individuals really means a lot to them. It's a great way to invest in your company. As we're wrapping up here, Eric, I have a couple of measures that I wanted to throw out there that I've been kind of thinking a lot about. One of them is gross revenue per route per month. I've been thinking a lot about that. I think if you get that right, and depending on the area that you service, it's going to be a little different. Like even within my company, we have, different goals for the branches. But that's a really important one to make sure that you're not under or overstaffed, and that, you're able to incentivize service personnel the right way. And then another one that I think I've always thought this one is important, and that's your cost per customer acquisition. You need to know exactly how much it costs you to acquire a new customer, and different marketing directives or different marketing systems are going to have a different amount. I'm going to pay more for a door-to-door account than I will for an inside sell that I got from Google AdWords, for example. So those are kind of the two numbers that are at the top of my mind right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if customer acquisition cost and cost per lead, I don't know if those are two numbers that ever leave my mind. Just because I always end up talking about that with people. Yeah. But those are two really, I would say they're pretty easy to get. Some of these trends are kind of hard to follow, and they kind of, end up in the weeds somewhere. But customer acquisition costs, it's, how much did you spend on marketing? Did you spend anything on commissions, for the team to sell the account? And there you go, right? You take that total cost divided by how many new customers you've got, and whether you include one-time services or not, that's a little bit different, but you got it, right? You got your customer acquisition cost. And just like Alan was saying, there's going to be different levels depending on what I usually call like the appetite for new customers. The bigger the appetite, usually the more you end up spending, because you're real hungry, and you'll get door-to-door accounts, you'll do acquisition accounts, you'll do everything, right? But yeah, cost of goods sold. We've got all sorts of stuff on this list. We've got cost per lead, we've got customer acquisition cost, gross profit is on this list, which is fantastic. Lots of good little things in here. So I think this was a good one.
Yep. Lots to think about. Great episode. I think there's pest control company it's kind of cool because there's always ways to improve. And as the owner, you need to give yourself credit sometimes. A lot of times you're only involved if there's a problem. So make sure to give yourself some patience, give yourself some kindness, and, just keep working at it. It's fun to kind of try new things and move things around. But I think between our cancellation discussion, decreasing cancellations, and talking about some KPIs that aren't, typical top line, bottom line cancellation percentage numbers, there's a lot to work on. So I want to make sure that you knew about our course. It's BugBucks Plus. There's so much information in there, and we're adding courses every single month. So make sure to check that out. And if you're not a member of our Facebook group, BugBucks, check us out there, BUGBUX on Facebook. We always have great conversations, and make sure to ask us questions in there. And, who knows, maybe someday there will be an episode just about your question, and we'll catch you next time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please show your support by subscribing and leaving us a 5-star rating. Thank you, and we'll catch you on next week's episode.